With all of the president's men, all of these grown-ass presidential aides, why was it you? Why was it a 26-year-old aide who made the decision to come out and tell that story, to give that firsthand account of being in the room, the lead up to January 6th, the what happened on January 6th, the run up? So why do you think it was you? Why didn't the guys step up and do what you did, Cassidy?
This question, I've thought a lot about this, and it never gets easier to answer because I don't like to speculate about other people's mindsets or intentions. And, I would also like to give credit to the Department of Justice, who has an ongoing investigation. And I do think a lot of investigation should go on behind closed doors. But I think back to where we were at in the summer of 2022. And, there hasn't, in my opinion, there has not been a massive mentality shift, but there has been a slight mentality shift away from this Trump or this cult-like Trumpism, at least I guess in my experience, but maybe it's because I'm on the other side of it now. In terms of why it was me, I can only answer for myself, and I know that I've reached a moral crossroads in April of 2022 where I felt that not only did I have the moral obligation to come forward with more information and to be more forthcoming with the committee, but I had betrayed the oath that I swore to protect and defend our country and our Constitution. And I saw a slight window of time where I could potentially correct course, and I wasn't doing it in any way to try to have a revisionist history. I think in the book it's abundantly clear that I try not to, I take full accountability for all of my missteps and the actions that I wish I had changed. But I do hope that by me coming forward, it either helped inspire or give others the courage to come forward, or it helped at least open up a roadmap, because I came forward because I thought that it was important to hold these people also under the court of public opinion.
Okay, so let's go back to that April. That April was that moment when you had that was the moment of moral clarity. Let's walk through that. You had been a loyal White House aide. You had been a loyal, and loyalty is a very important, obviously an important value for you. You watched what happened on January 6th. So tell me what happened in April where you decided that you were going to take this radical path of coming out and telling the truth.
I wish that we didn't have to say it was a radical path. And I think, it's just, this is a total sidebar, but this is also, I guess, relating to the question you asked before, because in my opinion, this shouldn't be seen as some radical path. We're just in this unfortunate state of our democracy and in our history where speaking the truth about things that actually happened when you swore an oath to do so is seen as some radical transition, and I also say, it shouldn't have been me sitting there that day. It should have been a lot of other people that have more information than I do. But anyway, sorry, I just had that, you said radical path, and it just made me think of that because it's just sad to me.
Fair point. Fair point.
But so April of 2022, I was working with Trump-affiliated counsel at that point. I had underwent two recorded depositions with the committee in February and March. And after each deposition, I went into my depositions with the committee. I'd searched for my own counsel that I could pay for or afford on my own, or that would put me on a payment plan. And I didn't have any luck with that.
Yeah.
So I turned to Trump.
You're not from a wealthy family. This is very, very expensive, right? And so
And I think that's something that's also often...
You had a Trump paid for attorney.
I think that's also often overlooked, and something that is deserving of more attention is not necessarily... The Trump world issues are large and they're prevalent, especially going into this next election year, but also just the general cost of all of this, to bring perspective to the American people about that. But after each deposition, I went into them wanting to be forthcoming, but I didn't feel empowered to be forthcoming. And I tried to bury the guilt that I felt after each deposition until I reached the point in April of 2022 when there were a few pages of my transcripts that were publicized. And I remember reading through the transcripts, and it was sort of like this out-of-body experience for me, but also just this really dark moment in my life where I had tangible evidence in front of me that I could no longer live in denial. I could no longer live in the state of denial. Not only that I had betrayed my country and the oath that I swore, but I had betrayed the person that I thought that I wanted to become when I entered public service.
Okay, how had you done that? How had you betrayed? What was the betrayal?
Uh, in my opinion, the betrayal happened
Yeah.
when I lost sight of the fact that I went into public service to serve the principle, the PLE principle. Um, and I grew to have a very strong loyalty to Donald Trump and to Mark Meadows.
Hmm.
And again, it's not necessarily a negative thing,
Hmm.
loyalty, but it's when you
Right.
begin to prioritize your loyalties to an individual over the greater cause. And I did do that. And I had lost sight of who I was, and I had lost myself for a while. And I don't look back on that or say that with any ounce of pride. It's a very shameful thing for me to admit, but I was complicit
So,
in a lot of
okay.
this.
So did you tell your Trump paid for lawyer that you wanted to be more forthcoming? How was that? What were they telling you to do? And how did you end up getting a new lawyer? Because this obviously was one of the crucial turning points in this whole story.
Yeah, so when I received my Trump World Counsel, we met one time before my first deposition. And I went in fairly forthcoming to him about how I wanted to conduct myself in the interview. But I also felt sort of the split between two worlds. And I had been in Trump world. I knew the strings, invisible strings, I guess I should say, that
Mhm.
come attached with accepting counsel from Donald Trump. And that was something that I wanted to avoid, but I also knew that I didn't want to have a target on my back. So I wasn't, you know, completely explicit about everything, but I was forthcoming about things that I knew that I thought I should share, tactics that I wanted to learn. I had never done a deposition before.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
so,
okay.
it was my first time ever needing an attorney too. So I had been fairly forthcoming with my counsel, and I was encouraged to say as little as possible. And I go into a lot of detail about it, both in my
Yeah.
interviews with the committee, which are all in the public record, specifically the September ones address this issue. There's over 900 pages in case anybody ever is interested, but I also
Yeah.
go into detail about it in the book. Um, so fast forward to April, I have this moral crisis or this sense of clarity where I'm trying to reach. Few things happen. I reach out to a member of Congress that did not serve on the January 6th committee and is a Republican, and they encouraged me to go look in the mirror and tell if I could pass the mirror test for the rest of my life, knowing how I had conducted myself and what I had wanted to share. I decided no, so I reached out to my best friend Alyssa Farah Griffin, and I also actually
Hmm.
read The Last of the President's Men by Bob Woodward, which featured Alex Butterfield. Went through one more interview with the committee, and they were still interested in more, uh, talking to me more throughout the month of June. So at that point, I realized that I needed to make a break with my Trump affiliated counsel and find my own.
So let's talk about what happened in June, and your conversations with Liz Cheney and others. You decided that you were going to testify in public. You knew that was going to be a life changing event. So again, talk to me a little bit about how did Liz Cheney or whoever it was talk you into going out in public, being on camera, being in front of the entire nation, and saying these things?
I don't want to say anybody talked me into it. I would say people opened my eyes to the gravity of the moment that we were facing and how important it was to have my voice and my physical presence testify to all of this live.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I didn't want to testify live. I
Yeah.
I didn't up until the moment I walked out. I did not want to have to do it, but I recognized that there was an importance to it. Um, Liz Cheney has been an absolute. I mean, she's an incredible force. She is an American patriot. I think no matter what your political affiliation is, she's somebody that we should all strive to be like. She has the heart of a founding father, and she cares about this nation. And I think to see somebody like Liz Cheney, who is more conservative than a lot of current members of Congress, sit next to on the dais next to Democrats with Adam Kinzinger, who's also an American patriot.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that image is so striking in this day and age. And I have been profoundly inspired by Liz throughout this journey, although this sort of diminishes, makes it sound like it's The Bachelor. But no, so after I retained my new counsel, I went in for another interview. And at that point, I felt that I was welcomed, or I was being welcomed more back onto the right side of history. And between Liz and my lawyers and the committee members and the committee staff, after meeting with them and discussing the prospect of a live hearing, I realized that it was important not only for the American people, but for women and for little girls to see that one person is enough to create change in this country, and it only has to start with one person. But that it's also important to have somebody that is willing to speak truth to power.
So let's talk about the timing, which you discuss. The timing of this was very, very unexpected at the time. It was a special session. There was a concern that you might be pressured, threatened. Talk about that.
Yeah, and I would refer to the committee on some of those items too, or members of the committee that had served, or staffers, just because they had more intel than I was receiving. At some points I had to focus on certain things I didn't necessarily want to know about the prospective threats that they were gathering. But no, I knew the day that I decided to formally switch counsel that no matter what I did going forward, I'd be subjected to the vitriolic threats from Trump world and the character bashing, the character assassinations. I was in that world. I know
you knew all that was coming. Right? You knew all that was coming.
I knew it was coming. I would be doing myself a massive disservice if I didn't admit that to myself. So I knew it was coming. I had prepared for it as much as I possibly could, but I also constantly found myself thinking about the fact that I had once been part of that process, and I know it's what was going to go on inside Trump world in those days following the hearing. And that was something that I had made peace with. It's different though when you're on the other side of it and actually experiencing it, because I didn't want to fuel any of what they were saying, because I spoke the truth, and anybody that has other things to say should go under oath and testify themselves. But it was a very jarring experience to experience it firsthand.